Hi guys, I'm Libertman, forced to be alone but free to decide how to live it. Welcome to the second live stream of the day. In this occasion, I'm going to be talking about a pattern that almost never gets named because it doesn't look dramatic and it doesn't look pathological. Men don't always cut people off. They don't always explode. They don't always disappear overnight. Very often men fade out. They answer later, they cancel more, they stop initiating, and one day they realize no one is really there anymore. Not because they wanted to be alone, but because emotional load quietly exceeded their capacity. So this live stream is about that mechanism, not as a moral failure, but as a neurosocial process. And for this topic, I have selected this study by Muscatell and other authors, a study called Social Status Modulates Neural Activity in the Mentalizing Network. And so before interpreting the results, we need some precision. So this study is not about loneliness or male withdrawal directly, or about depression or social media. It's about social status, stress, and mentalizing. And that matters because mentalizing is what allows us to understand others' intentions, to stay socially engaged under pressure, to tolerate ambiguity in relationships. When that system is under strain, withdrawal becomes more likely. So I'm beginning to read the study. Social status significantly modulated neural responses within regions of the mentalizing network, including the medial prefrontal cortex and temporoparietal junction. The mentalizing network, this is technically, but it doesn't matter to the name, especially the MPFC and TPJ. This mentalizing network is involved in perspective taking, in social evaluation, and understanding how others see us. Involved in external validation, as we have talked in earlier episodes. In simple terms, it helps us stay socially present when things are complex or stressful. This study shows that social status alters how strongly this network engages. And that is the key, because for many men, status pressure is constant through career, income, competence, social positioning. And when status pressure rises, the brain doesn't just feel stress, it reallocates resources. So let's see this fact of social status as emotional load. And here we need to make an important clarification. A status here is not an ego status. It's a perceived social position. So status answers questions like, am I respected? Am I competent? Am I valued? Am I feeling behind? For men, these questions are often identity critical. When a status threat is high, the brain shifts into monitoring mode, into self-protection, into error avoidance, which costs a lot of energy for our minds. I go on reading. Participants of lower perceived social status exhibited altered engagement of mentalizing regions during social evaluative tasks. So this is subtle but strong. That is that lower perceived status led into less efficient engagement of social cognitive regions under evaluative pressure. So this translated into our lived experience as man is that when a man feels behind, when he feels inadequate or underperforming, social interaction becomes cognitively heavier, not emotionally dramatic, but just tiring. So a man doesn't think, I don't want people. He thinks, I don't have the bandwidth to deal with this. And that's the invisible man effect. So why this withdrawal is often unconscious? The study doesn't say that that men choose to withdraw. What it suggests is that social engagement becomes more costly under status-related stress. When cost rises, the brain optimizes by reducing optional interactions, minimizing exposure, conserving energy as much as possible. This happens below conscious intention. So withdrawal often feels like procrastination, avoidance, this pattern of I will reply later until later never comes, of course. So why this shows up as fading and not disappearing? Men under emotional load usually withdraw gradually because relationships are not the explicit problem. They don't feel angry, they don't feel rejected, they feel depleted, energetically depleted. So the pattern looks like fewer initiations, shorter replies, cancelled plans, longer silences, and because there is no conflict, no one confronts it. The man becomes invisible without noticing. And why developed societies amplify this effect? In developed societies, identity is individualized, the status comparison is constant, failure is internalized, and rest is moralized. Men are expected to handle pressure silently. So when emotional load rises, they don't ask for help. They optimize away social contact. Not as a rejection, but as a survival mechanism. So clarifying what this study does not claim. To remain honest, this study does not prove that men withdraw more than women, or that does not prove loneliness directly, or doesn't give long-term isolation outcomes. It provides one mechanism, that status-related stress alters social cognitive engagement in men. That mechanism helps explain why fading happens, not why it always ends in loneliness. So if you have been enjoying up to this moment, I appreciate you liking this live stream or the video. If you're watching the replay, please subscribe to the channel and share the video with someone else that can get benefited by the content, and leave your comment after the live stream or video with your own thoughts or questions. I will try always to address them all as far as I can. And now let's continue talking about why men often don't realize that they are withdrawing, that they are vanishing into the shades. One of the most dangerous aspects of this invisible man effect is this lack of awareness of the experience itself. Men usually notice burnout at work, financial pressure, and mental fatigue, but they don't track social depletion. And why? Because social engagement is not framed as a resource for men. It is framed as optional, as secondary, or recreational. So when load increases, the brain deprioritizes it automatically. By the time a man realizes, oh, I haven't spoken to anyone in weeks, the withdrawal has already stabilized. And most people don't know where you are. I'll go on reading a bit more. Neural activity within mentalizing regions varied as a function of perceived social status during evaluative context. Well, that sounds too technical, right? So that means that social interaction is rarely neutral. Every interaction carries subtle evaluation inside ourselves, thinking, how am I doing? How am I perceived? Am I respected? When status pressure is high, each interaction feels like a test. The brain responds by lowering engagement, avoiding ambiguity, and minimizing exposure. This is like energy optimization in any engine or in any machine. So this is not fear, it's load management, like engines or machine. And because many male friendships are activity-based rather than emotionally buffered, once activity stops, connection dissolves quietly. But why this is most of the times mislabeled as avoidance? From the outside, this looks like emotional avoidance or social laziness or simply disinterest. But neurologically and psychologically, it's closer to capacity reduction. Men are not avoiding people. They are avoiding additional processing demands. That distinction matters because advice based on the wrong diagnosis always fails. Telling a depleted man, you should reach out more, bro, is like telling someone with no battery, use your phone harder. It makes no sense. It is like energetic matter. So this same mechanism produces very different withdrawal patterns depending on personality structure. So that's why now I'm going to analyze this mechanism from the C4PC model to see the difference among the four macro groups. In the case of the internal rationals, how does this withdrawal happen? Well, through cognitive retreat, through a reduction of social maintenance tasks, immersion in solitary systems. The invisible man pattern it is described in this group by still being productive, by still being fine externally, and to become socially unreachable. And the internal rational can have the risk of falling into years of unintentional isolation, or also falling into identity narrowing and loss of relational elasticity without being aware that they have fallen in this situation. So what helps the internal rationals? Well, low frequency but high depth contact, having predictable and non-evaluative interactions, and intellectual companionship tied to meaning. In the case of the internal emotionals, withdrawal happens through emotional overload, sensitivity to subtle rejection or comparison, and self-silencing. This invisible man pattern expresses through feeling unseen, to stop initiating conversation or interactions, and waiting to be noticed by the other. The internal emotional risk falling into quiet despair, in internalized shame, and emotional numbness in the mid to long term. And what helps the internal emotionals? Well, it helps them to have some emotionally safe space to talk with someone, to have permission to exist without performance, not being measured by productivity, to come back to meaning-based bonds and not status-based relationships. In the case of the external rationals, withdrawal happens through functional overload, leadership fatigue, and constant responsibility. This invisible man pattern expresses through being surrounded by people, no one actually supporting him, and collapsing privately without the rest noticing. They can fall in the risk of falling into burnout or relational cynicism and instrumentalizing people, getting detached of their feelings, of their empathy. And what helps the external rationals? Well, to come back to peer level alliances, to have shared load environments, and in general spaces where competence is not required. That is where their identity is mostly tied to. And finally, the external emotionals. For the internal emotionals, withdrawal happens through emotional overextension, with too much giving, not enough return, and a disappointment accumulation over time. And this invisible man pattern expresses through sudden disappearance, social exhaustion, and falling in this I'm done phase. They risk falling into instability and impulsive isolation, and ending up in identity fragmentation. What helps the external emotionals? Well, setting boundaries around emotional labor, having smaller but consistent circles, and trying to experience reciprocity over intensity. But why men don't come back easily? Once withdrawal stabilizes, returning is hard because the time have passed, shame accumulated, identity shifted, and social confidence eroded. Men often think it's been too long. It would be weird now. So they stay invisible. Not because they want solitude, but because the re-entry feels costly. So how to interrupt the invisible man effect? This is not about being more social. Be more social, bro. It doesn't work as simple as that. It's about reducing evaluative pressure. It's about choosing non-status interaction and about rebuilding low-cost connections. So effective re-entry looks like sending one message, not 10, having one consistent contact, not even a group, and having some shared task with more than the emotional expositions in conversations. So connection must feel lighter than isolation. Otherwise, it won't happen. So the invisible man effect is not a character flaw. It's what happens when emotional load exceeds our capacity. When status pressure distorts engagement. And men are taught to disappear rather than ask for help. Understanding this doesn't excuse isolation, but it removes a false sense of guilt. And only from clarity men can choose differently. So I hope this live stream or video has been helpful. If it was, please give it a like. Share this video with someone that can be benefited by it. Subscribe to the channel to support this content. Much courage, take care, and see you in the next one.